everybody. I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. I was looking at the, and may we have the Pledge of Allegiance? And can we have a roll call, please?
Chair McGill,
Here.
Vice Chair Clark, Commissioner Aldana,
Present.
Commissioner Feck,
Present.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton,
Hugh.
Commissioner Longstreet,
Here.
Commissioner Anander LaBerge.
Here.
Yes, everybody watching and participating, we may be a little bit rusty, so just, bear with us. We'll get the hang of it again. It's been a couple years since we've been in here. So do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Chair McGill, no changes.
Okay, great, thank you. Any written public comment? I didn't see any.
No public
Yeah.
comment was received
Okay.
written.
And that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. Total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. I don't have any speaker slips for non-agenda items. Is there anything else? Is there anybody on Zoom?
No, Chair McGill, there is not.
Okay, great. Well, that then brings us to our Youth Council report, and I see that we have a presentation of a public safety announcement on drug and alcohol abuse created by the Youth Council and Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Sure. So Chair McGill and Commissioners, we have Nicole Morgan with our Community Services section of Recreation here. This is your first time meeting her since COVID began. And then we have 2 Youth Council members that'll be doing the presentation and showing the video. Kavya Suresh and Amelia Vandermeer.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Amelia. We're both representatives of the Youth Council, and we created this short 1 to 2 minute video with Mothers Against Drunk Driving to help educate teens and young adults about the effects of driving under the influence.
And we wanted to make sure that our PSA came from a place of concern and compassion, and that we worded it as something that we genuinely care about, as driving and, alcohol and underage substance abuse is something that's really prevalent in our lives today. And we're seeing an uptick in the number of teenagers who are being pulled over or who are being harmed by underage drinking and underage use of drugs. But we also wanted to make sure that we gave teens the resources that they needed and let them know that we're here to support them and we're here to help them through whatever it is they may be experiencing, because we know that it's often not a choice, and it's often something that can be detrimental to someone's entire future. So we wanted to make sure that this PSA wasn't just informative, but it was caring and compassionate, and let the youth know that we're here to support them and we have resources for them to get better.
thank you, yeah. Is there any, do you have any follow-up, or are you open for questions, or?
Yes, we're open to questions if anyone has any.
I have a question. Where are you showing this? It's a great video. I like the simplicity of it. I wonder, for those kids that maybe don't read as fast, is it narrated at any?
Unfortunately, we were not able to narrate it, but we do have it, I believe it's on the MAD website and available through their social media, and I think we were hoping to put it on our social media, but I don't think that's happened yet.
Is it possible to get it into the high schools for don't they have morning, a lot of schools have the morning TV stuff?
Yes, I think that's something we could definitely do.
Yeah, okay, it's great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question I had as well, in terms of where is it going to be seen, because it's obviously, it's not like the TV snippets, certainly not the ones that, when I was growing up, which, fried eggs in pans. This is a lot more intelligent, thank you very much. It's nice to see that approach of saying, okay, you are thinking, comprehending, cognitive human beings, and let's have a conversation. So, the more places it can get where people can stop and reflect, I think the better off you'll be. So, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Go ahead.
Do you have it, or do they have it available in other languages?
That's a good question. I don't think we do, but that is something we could work on, I think. It's a good idea.
So because this was something that we collaborated with Mothers Against Drunk Driving for, we kind of just decided to go along with what they were asking. But after we met and after we discussed, we realized that these kinds of projects are really, really helpful to kind of just spread information about really important topics for youth. So we're going to continue to make content like this, and of course make it more accessible, make it slower, make it in other languages, and then, for folks who might have visual impairment, have alternative text, so to really bridge that ability and language gap. That's definitely one of our next
More
goals.
inclusive?
Absolutely.
Yes, it was very impressive. Awesome presentation, time well spent, and thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll get there. It's worse than a mute button. So that then takes us to our commissioner committee assignment reports, and I will just start on my left and go from left to right. So may we start with Commissioner Feck, please?
Yes, I was not able to attend the Creeks Commission this month.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Longstreet?
I did not attend the De La Guerra Plaza Committee meeting. I did attend some subcommittee meetings on the surfaces. We met to discuss the possibilities for De La Guerra Plaza.
Thanks. And Commissioner Unender-Labarge?
I did not attend the meeting. However, for arts and crafts, I did see the meeting agenda, and it looked like they had approximately 6 new artists that they were going to consider allowing to join the show. I did put in a request for an update from their advisor, but I didn't hear anything back.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Aldana?
Okay, for this month, I did stop by Ortega Park. It was, I believe it was the first Friday. And I was going by and I saw a lot of activity. So I pulled over after work, and they were doing exercise, which is good. Kids were playing basketball. That room, the welcome house, that was rented. There was also an artist there. They were painting on the cardboard. Little family gatherings, so it was good to see on the Friday. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lesnar Buxton?
I was unable to attend the youth council meeting this month.
Okay, thanks. And for me, at the beginning of the month, I went to the graduation dinner for the Chef Apprentice program. along with Commissioner Lester Buxton. And it was, not surprisingly, a great meal, and I would say a real testament not only to the participants, but certainly Anita Ho and all of the volunteers that are involved in making that such a successful program. I also went to the Ortega Park Murals Advisory Committee meeting. I don't think that's the right title, but that's just, which was a meeting which really to get the group together that had been advising on the murals going forward. And that is progressing. I'm not going to be participating in that going forward. Commissioner Aldana is going to be taking my place. I went to the combined meeting of the HLC and the De La Guerra Revitalization Committee. That was a workshop that was this past Friday. And I would say the items that had been up for continued discussion, I believe was the way that was phrased, were discussed, and I would say for the most part, the ball moved forward, significantly. A lot of agreement was achieved in a lot of areas, and which is great, great to see. I have been asked to join the Arts and Culture Subcommittee and have accepted that. And then we did not have a Park Foundation meeting this month, but you will have seen if you watch local TV that there is a final push for funding for the band shell, and they're $45,000 shy, and there have been some letters that have gone out, and then there was a piece on it on KEYT just a few days ago. So hopefully the final push will be successful, and that's it for me. And so I think that takes us to, where are we? We are Commission and Staff Communications. Do we have anything?
No, Chair McGill, not this month.
Okay. And then, where am I? Then we are at employee recognition, I believe. I'm looking at the screen here and my sheet.
Chair McGill, we have 2 employees that were recognized by the city administrator in April. Waleed Berat, who is our automotive equipment technician for 5 years of service to the city of Santa Barbara. Waleed is integral to all of the operation of our small equipment for our Parks Division, and is been with us for 5 years, as I said, and came to us from MTD. And then also Carlos Cornejo, who's a tree trimmer 2 in the forestry section of the Parks and Recreation Department, and recognized for his 5 years of service.
All right, well, thank you to both Waleed and Carlos for obviously being those kinds of positions that are the backbone of Parks and Recreation. And congratulations, and many more years, we hope. Let's see, and now that takes us to summary of council actions. We all should have the council action sheet. Does anybody have any comments or questions to anything that you saw there? I mean, largely it looks like it's a story of a resurgent recreation program and the revenues and allocations going with it, so it looks like just a good news story to me to read it. If there are no questions or comments, we will move on. So that takes us to minutes from the last meeting, with the recommendation being that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March 23rd, 2022.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, with no discussion, nope, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so moved. And with that, it's a little harder to juggle paper these up here again. So that takes us to, I believe we are at the trees. So Superintendent Slack, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair McGill and Commissioners. The First Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a street tree. It is an Indian laurel fig located at 424 North Milpa Street. The applicant listed multiple reasons on the application for removal, including damage to surrounding hardscape, sewer lateral issues, damage to the building's foundation, and those were the primary reasons listed on the application. The committee reviewed the tree. We also were back in person doing site visits together as a group. The committee noted the tree was in good health overall, did take a pretty critical look at the surrounding hardscape. There had been some subtle modifications to the parkway that was reflected in the photographs. We've opened the parkway up a little bit to eliminate a bit of a trip issue that was present. The photographs show the sidewalk prior to that work that was done by the streets department. The streets department did review the sidewalk. We were out there a couple months ago looking at it, and at that time determined that it's not a candidate for repair. We shared that information also with the committee on site. There was extensive discussion regarding the claims of building damage. It's something that we've seen recently as well. The committee consensus was they would like some more information that really illustrated the actual damage to the structure rather than essentially just speculation. I had also had communications with the applicant prior to the review and encouraged them to try to provide some additional documentation regarding the foundation damage that they were claiming on the application. We did not receive any, and again, the committee felt quite strongly that there needed to be a little bit more there to illustrate the damage to the actual structure. The sewer lateral issue is something that we've seen often. We also discussed that on site, noting that in almost all cases, sewer laterals can be repaired without the need for tree removal, and that would be the case in this instance as well. After extensive review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the request for the Indian Laurel Fig at 424 North Milpas Street.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slack. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? I do not. Commissioner Aldana.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Regarding the sidewalk, because I did go over there and assess it, I mean, there is a little there's cracks buckling, and towards the tree, it is buckled and beveled, so that's not a possible trip hazard.
And Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, we defer those decisions to the Streets Department, and we could certainly go back and take another look at it, but based on our previous review, they were confident that at this time it didn't warrant any further repairs than where the sidewalk had been removed next to the tree, which was raised quite a bit. So if you were exiting a vehicle, stepping onto the sidewalk from the street level, there was quite a bit of lip present there, and we removed essentially like a 2x3 section that eliminated that trip hazard, and then they were comfortable with the rest of it. But we could always have them relook. I also want to make a note that the recommendation from the committee was to deny without prejudice, reinforcing the fact that they would like to see some more information about the damage to the structure.
Yeah, my observation is that I didn't see more than about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of actual sidewalk displacement, sorry, when I was looking at it. Do we have any additional questions? Questions?
Yes.
Okay.
And being that I'm fairly new, so I understand, and everybody else, without prejudice, what exactly does that mean?
Fair question.
And Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, essentially it allows the applicant to return without being subject to paying application fees again. So at any point in the future, they're able to return back and provide additional supplemental information that can support the application for further review. So it would go back to the committee with that additional information. They would re-review the application in entirety and make another recommendation on the application
Yeah.
for the commission.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think that's it for questions. Do we have anybody wishing to speak on this item? I do not have a
Chair
slip.
McGill, I think
sorry.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have kind of a general question. I noticed that tree and one aisle didn't have any notices on it. Can you explain what's that in oversight, or do you not put notices on some trees? My friend who was helping me always looks for the notices, and we couldn't find any yesterday.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, we did post notices on the trees. We did it during our site visits, which on a busy walkable street like Milpas may have been a little too early. And I'm anticipating it was probably removed prior to your site visit. But there was a notice, so we'll make sure to
Okay,
do it.
thank you.
It's not the first time that's happened, yeah.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, just as a point of reference, which has nothing to do with the decision here, I know we all are familiar with Milpas Street. It is in the city's long-range plan, the city, to really look at access and roadway improvements and take a comprehensive look. Hopefully, some point in the future, we'll be able to bring that planning effort forward, and as part of that, really look at the long-term vision for Milpas Street and the trees there. But it requires a lot of public engagement, as you can imagine. But that's something that should be moving forward in the next number of years, I think.
Thanks, thanks. Okay, do we have, I don't see any public comment in the room. There's no slips. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
Chair McGill, no, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm open for discussion or motions as appropriate.
I would move that we deny the removal of the Indian Laurel Fig at 424 North Milpas, and deny without prejudice.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you, Commissioner Aldana. Is there any discussion? Going once, going twice? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. Thank you very much. On Dakota Street.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a deodar cedar located within the front setback of the property at 1319 East Coda Street. The applicant's requesting removal due to limb failure, general decline in vigor, and essentially safety concerns due to root disturbance. It's not super visible in the photograph, but the adjacent property driveway as well as sidewalk has been repaired at some point in the not too distant past, and the applicant claims some roots were removed during that work. The committee reviewed the tree. There was consensus that it was in essentially poor, fair to poor shape. Noted that very little, if anything, could be done to improve the vigor, sort of, right the ship and get the tree growing again, given the extensive decline throughout the canopy of the tree. The loss in biomass was a concern for the committee during review. There is a deodar cedar directly behind the deodar cedar that's subject for removal. And again, the committee, with their concerns in loss of biomass, reviewed potential planting options, including the front yard, as well as noting that the parkway currently did not have a street tree. During those discussions, there was agreement that the existing deodar cedar behind the one in the photo here would do much better, and there was limited planting space within the front yard to support the planting of a new tree. And they turned their attention to the empty parkway and made comments that it seemed practical to plant a new street tree to offset the loss of the existing deodar cedar within the front setback. After review, the committee made the recommendation to approve the removal of the deodar cedar on the condition that the applicant plant a new street tree within the parkway in front of the home. The designated street tree is a Coast Live oak. And during that review, the committee made the determination the commission can make the finding that the principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions about this tree? Commissioner DeBarge.
I just have a question, not particular to this tree, but particular to the recommendation for the removal. When there is a recommendation for removal, do they give any consideration to what other wildlife might be existing in the tree at the time, and not so much to impact the decision ultimately to remove, but perhaps on the timing of when to remove it? For example, it is baby bird season right now, and while this tree itself may not have a nest in it because it's so barren, there are other trees, I'm sure, that are recommended for removal that might have such nests. Is that ever given consideration as far as the timing of when someone may remove a tree?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Unandra-Leberge, it's a great question. When the commission makes a decision and approves a tree for removal within the front setback, the applicant has discretion when they can obtain a permit from our office. Those permits are valid for 60 days. We don't have a lot of discretion as to when that tree can be removed, aside from having a conversation with them about why it may be not a good idea to remove a generally healthy tree during, peak nesting season, which we're currently in.
I'm going to ask just a follow-up to that, because I think we've actually had this come up once before, relatively recently, in my memory, just from having done my own tree trimming work, not personally, but is that there are actually I think it's state regulations, not county, that really dictate what kind of work can be done without at least checking first. And that might be worth looking into, just even if it's a point of information to give to applicants.
Yeah, Chair McGill and Commissioners, I kind of glazed over, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act does hold individuals accountable for disruption of nesting birds. And I think that extends well past birds that are protected exclusively by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And I do want to say that we interface often with most of the tree care companies in town, and everybody's doing as good of a job as possible at doing inspections and making sure that they're not disrupting active nesting birds. And we've had lots of conversations with the local Audubon Society, and there's lots of resources, and I think the general public's becoming much more educated about the need to limit certain tree work activities during peak nesting season. The challenge, I think, with some things is nesting season's extensive. It's quite long, from March to the end of September. But there's certainly lots of opportunities to get creative about when you do work that isn't necessary. There's necessary tree removal activities, and then there are things that certainly can wait till it's at a more appropriate time. And I think we're internally and externally, continuing to work, within the community and with other tree care companies to try to provide some of that education in addition to, the local networks like the Audubon Society that's putting lots of that information out.
Okay, thank you. Good question. If there are no other questions, do we have any speakers? I have no slips.
Chair McGill, no, we do not.
All right. And no one on Zoom, I take it? No, okay. Okay, thanks. All right, with that, open it up for discussion and/or motions as appropriate.
I'll make the motion to agree with the Street Tree Committee and approve the removal of the tree at 1319 East Coda Street.
All right, and then all we need to add is that the principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal, yes?
Okay, yes,
And the replacement.
and also to plant a California oak tree on the parkway.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so moved. That was a sad-looking tree.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a request to remove a total of 4 trees located at the property of 5 Rubio Road. It includes 2 king palms as well as 2 pepper trees. The applicant listed on the application for removal essentially a desire to do some re-landscaping within the front setback of the property. They had mentioned that they had recently met with fire prevention staff and reviewed the property from like a fire-wise perspective, and the fire prevention specialist provided some recommendations. Those included trimming of the palm trees with the dead fronds that you can see in the photograph, and also essentially generally that they would be supportive of the removal of the pepper trees. The committee reviewed the application. There was a general agreement that the small pepper tree that has been growing within the wall for several years was in a very poor location. Its continued growth would lead to further damage of the wall and was just a classic example of wrong tree in wrong place. The larger of the two pepper trees that's located more within the front setback of the property was determined to be in good health, well-maintained, and really no valid reasons for removal at this time. The review of the palm trees, there were a couple dead stems, and the applicant can remove those dead stems without the need for a permit, as outlined in the 15.24 of the municipal code. But the remaining portion of the king palms, the living ones, the committee, there was general consensus that they just really needed a little bit of TLC. The committee noted a little bit of watering would probably drastically improve their vigor, and a little bit of pruning would clean up the dead fronds, and that generally they were in good health and warranted retention. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the pepper tree that was located within the wall, and determined that principles of good forest management could support that removal as a finding. The remaining two king palms and additional pepper tree, the committee determined that at the time of review, no findings supported their removal and recommended denial of those three trees.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Slack. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
On the application, it says that they will replace with either a California live oak or a citrus tree to replace the pepper tree. Is that the single pepper tree that's being removed, or was that contingent on both of them being removed?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, based on discussions with the applicant, it was their desire to remove the pepper tree within the front setback, the larger of the two, and that's likely where they had intended on planting a new tree.
So just a follow-up, just for clarity. So it is your belief that, well, there's no contingency attached to the recommendation to approve the removal of the one tree and not the other three?
And Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's correct. I think there was general agreement amongst the committee that the pepper tree was in good health. It essentially fills up that space, and the existing king palms also kind of took over that additional part of the front landscape, and that there was ample trees on the property not to warrant any conditions.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? All right, I have no slips for this one. Do we have anybody that you see?
Chair McGill, there are no Zoom attendees.
Okay. With that, open for discussion and/or motion.
I'll make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation at 5 Rubio Road for the removal of the smaller pepper tree in the wall and denying the removal of the larger pepper tree and the king palms. And this is supports the principles of good forest management.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved, which now takes us to Medina Way, or Medina Way.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Canary Island date palm located within the front setback of the property at 3711 Medina Way. On the application, the resident listed a couple concerns. Maintenance concerns was significant, as well as just general safety with continual falling of dates and fronds, and also a desire to re-landscape that specific section of the property, stating the desire to use local, regionally appropriate natives with the intent on capturing more carbon and being more beneficial to the local environment than the existing date palm. The committee reviewed the application. They noted the palm was in good health, had been very well maintained over the years. We did have some discussion on site with the applicant about the tree, the value the tree provided to the community there, the small cul-de-sac. And after review, the committee made the recommendation to deny the request for the removal of the Canary Island date palm at 3711 Modena Way.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Slack? No, I don't either. Hope from under the gavel here. We do have a speaker for this one, and Lisa Daniel, who I'm guessing is you. You're welcome to come forward, and when you get yourself settled, I'll hit this button and you will have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay,
Ready?
great. Thank you very much.
Hi, well, thank you for the opportunity to at least address the tree. Part of the original application, I had some great conversations with Mr. Slack. He's very, very helpful and knowledgeable. But in the original application, I did not have anything about a tree replacement, which would make sense for a tree of this size. And what I'd like to do, not in that location, but on the other end of the front yard, is put a California coast live oak to replace this tree coming down. And again, as in my application, that photograph doesn't show it very well, but the fronds get very, very close to both of the properties, and that concerns me with fire. Fire season starts earlier and earlier, and it's going to be an ongoing problem for the foreseeable future. And also the annual maintenance runs about $1,000, and it's also very dangerous for those that do it. I've had people get injured, hornets' nests and things of that nature. It just doesn't provide much shade, et cetera, et cetera. And also because I've just completed an ADU right there, that is going to be used by a tenant, and those dates are large and easy to trip on, as my 2 sons have told me over the years, trying to use their skateboards. So that's really it. I think the most important part was the live oak. California, why is it live? Of course it's live. Not dead coast oak. So that would be in the replacement.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much. All right. And I assume we don't have anything on Zoom?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I guess, given we have a change from the application, open it up for comments, and we have a proposal for a California live oak that was not in the original application. Any comments? Further questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
For Mr. Slack, would her proposed new tree change your recommendation?
It's not your-
Chair McGill and Commissioner Unander-LaBerge, staff typically rarely ever participates in the decision-making of a front setback tree, so we facilitate the process, but the municipal code really limits our decision-making authority to essentially providing permit exemptions. So if the tree's dead, hazardous, or has been determined by the fire department to warrant removal due to fire concerns, those are really the only times that staff can essentially issue a permit. Aside from that, we facilitate the process, the committee makes the recommendation, and the commission takes action on the application.
Chair McGill Commissioner Ananda Laberge, that the commission does have the opportunity, however, if there's a change in the application, to refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, if you so chose to do that.
That would be my recommendation, because it is a beautiful tree. It's a gorgeous tree. A small coast live oak is not going to replace that tree for another 15 years. So, you know, it's not like we can do one for one. I would encourage you to put that coast live oak in anyhow, because we're in desperate need of that biomass as a community. But I would like to refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for their recommendation with this new information.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at too. I mean, I know that neighborhood quite well, and that tree, it would be a material loss to that neighborhood, in my view, to have that tree removed. And certainly, palm fronds are, they're just something that many of us deal with on an annual basis. That's just part of the deal here. And so I'd be really uncomfortable having that tree removed at this point, but I'm quite comfortable with having it referred back with the changed proposal to be reviewed. Commissioner Aldana.
Regarding the palm fronds and the dates that fall, was that kind of like a health and safety issue, or because now that you have an ADU?
Well, I've always had it rented, but now I've spent a lot of money. Oh, I'm sorry. It's always been rented. Now it's just been upgraded substantially. So, yes, but of course, I've been caring for that tree for the last 25 years since I've lived in that home. So it wasn't always that big. And it wasn't always that close to structures, and we didn't have the fire situation that we do now. So, but yes, health and safety.
All right. I'm prepared to entertain a motion, but I also may perhaps just one more comment from Mr. Slack on just a reiteration on healthy trees versus and fire. I mean, we've had this conversation a couple times, but also litter. I mean, just the reality of what leaf litter and palm frond litter and in our decision-making process, because generally I think litter is something that we accept as the part of life of having a wonderful urban forest.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's essentially correct. I think that in situations such as, specifically speaking to Canary Island date palms, where fronds cycle through pretty quickly and you can develop quite a bit of dead fronds pretty fast, and they have a tendency to linger. You know, some palms, those fronds fall off, whereas the date palms tend to retain them. You know, they do fall off, but a lot of times that's really accomplished through pruning. So certainly there's instances where, you know, embers, and we could what-if scenarios where, you know, lots of trees do have potential for fire. But the fire department, the fire prevention staff, they've always advised that there's, you know, a difference between potential versus like true fire hazard. So I think the concerns are valid. But in terms of the commission's review of trees and fire concerns, you're correct that, you know, some dry twigs or dry fronds is not grounds for true removal when discussing fire.
Thank you. Are we ready for a motion, or do we have?
Yeah, I'm going to make one comment before. We wouldn't have an olive tree in Santa Barbara if we took them out for litter. We wouldn't have our jacarandas. There are many trees we would not have. So, yeah, we have to take, I think we really have to be realistic about that one. And also, all of us deal with palm fronds, whether we have a palm tree in our yard or not. I mean, I get many from neighbors and, you know, so that's just a fact of having trees, I think. But I would like to send this item back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for their recommendation with the new information about the coast live oak.
I'll second that. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved, and going without saying, this is a without prejudice type of, yeah. Okay, thank you very much, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Daniels.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to make a modification to the currently designated street tree species for the 100 to 1,200 blocks of West Mitchell-Terena Street. So the catalyst for this review was a couple months back, we looked at a tree, Chinese holly, that was located within the road right-of-way of the property within the 1,200 block of West Mitchell-Terena. The commission approved that request for removal on the condition that a new street tree be planted. When staff was looking at the designation, there was no existing designation for the 1,200 block of West Mitchell-Terena Street. And I think it is worth saying there's extremely limited planting potential within that block. But based on the action and the condition, we needed to make a designation. And when we started looking at the 1,200 block, we extended that review from the 100 to 1,200 blocks of West Mitchell-Terena Street. And the reason why we did that is because it currently only has the firewheel tree designated. So for essentially 11 blocks, which is a very critical arterial street for Santa Barbara, was just the firewheel tree, which is a great tree. It's a tried and true performer. It's also difficult to grow, and it's becoming increasingly unavailable in the nurseries. So rather than just designate the 1,200 blocks, staff brought the 100 to 1,200 blocks forward for discussion with the committee to come up with essentially a palette, multiple options, give us a lot more flexibility and utility and decision-making when we look at tree planting on West Mitchell-Terena Street. So as part of this review, we were trying to look at, and this kind of goes back to the report that we discussed a few months back, where we want to develop these designations so there's essentially lots of options, right? There may be that big, large canopy tree. So in this case, we kind of settle in the coast live oak for numbers of reasons. But then we want to look at things like there's parkways that may not support a large tree. There may be other utilities or infrastructure conflicts where you could plant a tree, but you might not want to plant that giant tree that you know is going to be a problem in 15 to 20 years. There may be overhead power line concerns where, again, that large tree may not be the most practical, but still a more than suitable location for street trees. So we spent a couple months talking about this because it was a pretty extensive review. The goal was to develop this large canopy tree. I think that we're always going to be trying to look at that because bigger canopy means more shade, means reduced heat island effect, means more carbon sequestration, and all of the other good things that trees do, including habitat for lots of animals and nesting birds. In addition to that, the firewheel tree was determined to be retained because it's been very functional. And we essentially built in two other trees to add a little bit more interest, a little bit more flexibility. Both the water gum, the Marina madrone, and the golden trumpet tree are all small to medium-sized trees that give us lots of flexibility. And the last thing, which we kind of touched on with the firewheel tree, is the availability. At any given time, you could have a project come through, not necessarily a Santa Barbara project. It could be, a gigantic project in LA, and you literally cannot find a Marina madrone because they bought them all, right? I challenge you right now to go try to find an island oak. You can't because they're all on Modoc Road right now, like literally. So anyway, after extensive review, a couple months, we collectively determined and the committee made a recommendation to formally change the street tree designation list for the 100 to 1,200 blocks of West Mitchell-Terena to include the water gum, the Marina madrone, the firewheel tree, the golden trumpet tree, and also the coast live oak.
Thanks. Anybody have any questions? I guess my only mine would really be a curiosity. I mean, this is, given West Mitchell-Terena, this is probably not something that's going to come up a huge amount, but would you try to focus certain trees on certain blocks for continuity, or would you just kind of see what's available in the moment or what the size of the spot was?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's a great question, and that was actually part of the discussion. The designers on the committee certainly felt pretty strongly about that. We, as staff, I think, want that ability to make decisions that are most practical, and I think when we start to narrow the decision-making on what we can use, we kind of limit our options. I think our slam dunk is we're always going to go to maximize canopy cover, and I think that that's always our goal. And then based on sort of what we're given, we're going to make the best decision. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is grow the biggest tree we can and cause the least amount of problems in doing so.
We should put that on a banner.
I have a question. On the golden trumpet, are those flowers? It's hard to see, but is the yellow, like, that's a flower?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Feck, that is correct.
Oh, it's pretty.
We don't have a lot of those in town, but yeah, it's relatively unique in that it has a very abundant floral display prior to essentially breaking dormancy and pushing leaves out. You can see, I don't know, I haven't seen them for a while, but there's a pink version, and there's a fantastic one at Plaza Veracruz that was looking pretty spectacular like a week ago, but I don't know what it looks like now.
Nice. Yeah, it's really pretty. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Commissioner
Okay,
O'Donnell?
so basically, you're going to have 5 street trees designated for West Milton Torino. And what about the 0 block? What do they have there?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, I do not know off the top of my head, but we could look it up. It's now online and available. It may be Firewheel as well, but I'm not sure off the top of my head.
All right, I'm assuming we have no comment, but from the public, but let me just double check.
Yeah, no public comment.
Okay, great, thanks. All right. Oh, I will, go ahead. Yeah.
Would you like to include the 0 This way, it's everything west of State.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, despite remembering why we didn't include it, there was good rationale at the time. Without looking up the designation, I don't recall why specifically we looked at that 100 to 1,200 blocks. But there was, whatever the existing designation was, we felt comfortable with it. I think if memory serves, it is the Firewheel. The 0 to 100 block is very tight. It's mostly tree wells, and there's not as much planting opportunities through there. And in some situations, just keeping to one tree does make good practical sense.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody prepared to make a motion, assuming there's no further discussion? Sure. Go for it.
I move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations for the 100 to 1,200 blocks of West Mitchell Torrena for the designation as the Firewheel, the Water Gum, the Marina Marone, the Golden Trumpet Tree, and the Coast Live Oak.
Do I have
Did
a
everybody?
second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Nope, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, so moved. And that's it for this month's trees. Thank you very much, Mr. Slack. And that takes us to our administrative and staff reports, the director's report. Director Zachary.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, we have a few things to report to you for activities in April. First of all is summer camp registration, which I can't say didn't go off without a hitch. However, the first day was excellent with the signups for junior guards. The second day on April 6th was a little more challenging as we had issues with our Perfect Mind platform, which resulted in a number of people being very frustrated. However, it all worked out in the end. I'm happy to report. And as a result, we had just over 1,900 summer camp registrations over 2 days, which surpassed what we had last year, which was just over 1,800. And we continue to have signups, and we monitor our registrations, send out our marketing emails. Some things fill up immediately because they're super, super popular. Sometimes things take a little bit longer as families are figuring out their summer camp, summer plans. But just like we had pre-pandemic and we've been crawling our way forward over the last number of years, we will have a wide range of camps this summer in Santa Barbara, both full day and part day, as well as counselor and training opportunities. Same longtime favorites that everyone's familiar with: nature camp, junior guards, beach volleyball, swim and tennis, ceramics, and theater camps. We have some new camps that started last year: Lobster Joe's, trapeze, and water polo, I think is new this year, that will be offered. And then also, very importantly, the scholarship opportunities that we provide to youth in Santa Barbara. We currently have about 155 scholarships that we hope will be awarded, and we do that with the Campership Alliance and the Police Activities League. As part of that, and I'd have to double check, but we also have a new scholarships for skate camp. And this is funding that's been provided by individuals in the community that lost their sons, who were avid skaters and want to be able to offer skate camp activities to youth in need, as well as promoting safe skating, so the use of helmets and pads and that kind of thing. So we'll be able to add that to our summer roster this year. The funds are held in the Park Foundation, so they'll be transferred over to the city. And then our Summer Fun program registration started on April 25th, and we're very pleased to share with you that we're expanding back to 2 schools this year, 2 sites. Last year it was just at Franklin Elementary. We have a second site at Washington this year, which is great. So we offered a much pared down program last year, and we're hoping to re-expand it back to what it was pre-COVID levels. This is really important because it's free, and it's an 8-week program. It's something that the department, the city, subsidizes heavily through the general fund. It's one way that we can provide camp offerings to families of more significant financial need. And then switching over to trails, as Commissioner Longstreet will remember, we got tumbled headfirst into trails issues back in 2007. Here we are 15 years later, and although we haven't solved all of the trail access issues, we have managed over the years to put together a solid group of city, county, Forest Service, and volunteers that engage in trail maintenance activities around specific trail days, like State Trails Day, so which is held in April of every year. And this year, we had 25 people participate in trail maintenance along the Ridge Trail, which is part of the Cold Spring Trail system. As much as we wanted to back in 2007, we always hoped to have dedicated funding for trail maintenance. That has not come forward lately, so we rely tremendously on volunteers to support trail maintenance throughout the Front Country Trail system, and then city staff, county staff, and Forest Service staff. And then Easter egg, it was Easter. Commissioners will remember we had a very popular Easter egg hunt at Chase Pond Park, went on dormant mode during the pandemic. Since the city first initiated Easter egg hunts, there's many that are offered throughout the community, including one at the Santa Barbara Golf Club. So this year we decided to join forces with the golf club and host our Easter egg hunt there, with the city providing 8,000 pieces, which seems like a tremendous amount. And the event was held on April 16th, and it was a huge success. I would like to recognize that the Santa Barbara Firefighters Association and the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association actually provide the contributions for the candy that's part of the hunt. And then lastly, turf renovations. If you were in the waterfront last month in March, or you've been up to the Mesa this month in April, you will see sections of the park cordoned off. We're doing some turf renovations, much long needed, overdue turf renovations to make the turf safer for the drop-in play that occurs at certainly at La Mesa Park, and just the general use at Ambassador Park. So this is an initiative that we began a few months ago and will continue into the new fiscal year. And that conclude, and I would also add that in the next year with the council-approved ARPA funding, we'll be able to expand that into more significant turf renovations as well as irrigation upgrades in a number of our city parks. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Commissioner Longstreet.
I just have a comment. I'm so glad to see summer fun back open for our families because, you know, we have the haves and the have-nots in our community, and there's a lot of our working families just can't afford childcare in the summer, and they're looking at 8 long weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, cobbling together, you know, safe environments for their children. And summer fun, you know, it provides that. And we're seeing now with people going back to work and having less money in their pockets because of inflation and things, that it's even more important. It's coming up more and more about how we take care of our children. And, you know, what the latest thing I heard was that preschool care equals college tuition at UCSB. And that is an astounding fact for a family to have to look at spending $13,000 a year for one child in childcare. So this is just a little bit of help for those families that need it. So thank you for everything. And, you know, I would always encourage City Council to put as much money as they can into that. That's the prevention for our children.
Any other comments? Questions? Commissioner Aldana? Okay.
Just
Okay.
thank you for the good report.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to, Commissioner Longstreet said what I wanted to say. Is summer fun is the one thing that I circled as that's really critical. I think that I'm really glad to see it coming back up to full strength, and certainly hope that that you're able to staff it appropriately and that City Council continues to fund it and fund it appropriately. It's really a critical element. So thank you. And I'm curious to see where all that candy went. 8,000 candy. How many kids ate 8,000 candies? 500? That's a lot of candy per kid, though.
There's
I was gonna say, that's going to be one weekend. All right. And I think, let's see, we have no old business on my agenda, which takes us to new business, which takes us into our budget discussion. So,
Chair McGill and Commissioners, we have a joint presentation for you. I will do the initial slides. If Cameron Benson, the Creeks Division Manager, here to present Creek slides, and then Tina Nelson, our Business Manager, will be presenting the Golf Fund slides. I have Jasmine LeBlanc, who's helping me and available to answer questions, as well as Simone Herrera, who is our Parks Manager. He was recently appointed to the position, and Simone can talk anything you need to know about parks if you have questions. So with that, I think we'll get going. We have a number of slides, and hopefully we'll move through them fairly rapidly, but certainly happy to answer any questions along the way or at the end of the presentation. We will be looking for the commission to make a recommendation to the City Council regarding this proposed budget. Our budget hearing at the City Council is on Monday, May 9th at 1:30. I think it's 1:30. Yes, 1:30 p.m., so it'll be in the City Council chamber. So we're going to give you a department overview, talk about program highlights by fund, focus specifically on the general fund first, and then, as I mentioned, the Creeks Fund and Golf Fund. Within each of those funds, we'll touch on our capital projects that are proposed for fiscal year '23, and then for the Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund, touch on reserves, and then open it up for questions, public comment, and discussion. So just to take a quick look at how the department's currently organized, we have 19 programs, 4 funds. We have 6 management positions. We have 1 that's currently vacant. We have just under 91 full-time equivalent permanent staff. And over the course of the year, we have hourly staff that represent 110,000 hours that are spent supporting department programs and services, largely in the recreation division, as you might imagine, both after-school programs during the school year, but very much focused on our summer camp programs and the services we provide in the summer. When we look at where that lineup spreads out across each division, you can see our permanent staff. The majority of them are in parks, but I would also add that of those parks staff, we have forestry staff and we have staff that are focused on maintaining street medians and parkways, as well as providing services to the Public Works Department at Sheffield Open Space and the Waterfront Department landscaping. So they're not actively in city parks, they're housed in our department. Hourly hours by division, as you can see, the bulk of them are in recreation, just under 95,000. So if you divide that by 2, you end up with another 47 and a half people full-time that support our programs and services. And similarly in parks, if you divide by 2, it's the equivalent to about 8 full-time equivalents in hourly hours. When we look at our expenditures by division, by fund, again, recreation and parks make up the bulk of that. Almost $20 million is proposed for the expense budget in '23, followed by creeks, golf, and then the smallest expenditure is in the administration division. When we look at our revenues by division and fund, so going back to that last slide very briefly, you see our recommended expense budget is just over almost $29.5 million. And then when you look at the revenues, 16.3 is in revenue, coming from a variety of sources. So 55% of the operating budget for the entire department, including the 2 funds, is from revenues that come in to support our initiatives. Recreation being the largest at $5.9 million, followed by creeks, and that is Measure B, so that's revenue that comes through the bed tax. Golf comes from golf user fees, so golf operates as an enterprise fund, so it's revenue that's generated at the golf course that is used to then operate the golf course. And the parks revenues are more focused on forestry and parkways and medians, so the work that we do in street right-of-ways that's funded through the utility users tax. Next slide, thanks. So program highlights. When we talk about each of our divisions, our forestry division is robust. We have over 30,000 street tree sites, 9,000 park trees, and we guesstimate how many are in the open spaces. We have over 450 different species of trees in the city, which is pretty special, including a number of specimen trees, lots of 1s and 2s. So when we're talking about maintaining trees in the city, at times, just as the commission is aware, there are city blocks where you have the same tree, and so they can be grid pruned. And at other times, we have these old majestic trees that take a lot of effort in order to keep them in good shape. Our beaches, 16 grooming and raking cycles, over 3 miles of beach. So of the city of beaches within the city of Santa Barbara, that focus is essentially from the edge of the city limits, so you think of where the Clark Estate is, Andre Clark Bird Refuge, all the way to the edge of Ledbetter Beach. Not all of that beach is touched by equipment, but portions of it are. And then medians and parkways. So we maintain over 500,000 square feet of medians and parkways throughout the city. Park operations really focused on what you'd expect. Landscape turf maintenance, park safety, cleanliness. When we look at our acres, over 1,800 acres, and a variety of different situations within those. And then, as we recently talked about, we coordinate the Front Country Trail program on behalf of the other agencies, and then also coordinate the city's IPM program on behalf of all departments within the city, even though we're just one component of our integrated pest management program. Our priority projects going into the new year, implementing turf renewal and irrigation controller repairs in 11 city parks. This is the project/program that will receive ARPA funds, $750,000 in ARPA funds, which is tremendous. We've had a long-standing need to address irrigation and certainly turf renewal throughout our park system. We are also continuing and refining our monitoring of water usage very closely in order to ensure we're using it efficiently. Water rates are going up again, as we all know, and that does affect this department because we also pay for all the water that we use in city parks and facilities. We are continuing addressing the deferred street tree and park tree maintenance, planting, as well as deferred maintenance. In our capital program, there's an allocation of $250,000 of Measure C funds, and we're really focusing it on areas of the city that really do need a lot of additional tree attention that have been unfunded for many years. And then, importantly, although it may not seem that exciting, our work order and safety inspection systems are in need of a total overhaul, and so that's a high priority for us going into the New Year's. We can really have a good sense of, from the work order initiation to completion, and our safety inspections. Recreation, we have so many programs in recreation, whether it's youth activities, after-school, summer fun, summer camps, aquatics, very vibrant aquatic program, whether it's at Los Baños or in the ocean. Sports, tennis, and pickleball, and the commission is well up to speed on pickleball and the growth of pickleball, as well as tennis is doing just great, thanks in part to the pandemic. But we host and manage a variety of organized activities around all of these programs. And so when you look at the numbers, just as a broad brush, and it can vary across the years, you know, the number of registrations over 10,000, children served in after-school programs, so that's just during the school year, households served through our weekly meal and food distribution programs that are free, and then community special events with our sort of transitioning out of COVID, I think we're still calling it. People are coming back and wanting to do community special events, and it falls on the shoulders of Parks and Recreation to facilitate that happening, as well as reservations in our parks and facilities. We don't do this all by ourselves. We have recreation providers that are both independent contractors. As many as 65 at any one time are actually providing these programs within city facilities and in our parks. And we have co-sponsorships with 14 different organizations that also operate recreation programs on city property for city residents and community residents. And then free programs. We mentioned summer fun, but we also offer a free recreation swim program, food distribution, as I mentioned, and then our youth focus program, Youth Apprentice, Arts Alliance, and we have a new one starting this year, which is a summer nights program, which will be at La Cumbre Junior High School. And then also scholarship opportunities, whether it's recreation after school. I mentioned the Campership Alliance, which is just in the summertime, and then youth swim lessons, which are held at Ortega Park. So program changes post-COVID for our newest commissioners. This time last year, we were proposing to eliminate over $1.1 million from our general fund budget. Some of it was mandated reductions because of the city's lost revenue associated with the pandemic. And some of it had to do with our concern that we weren't going to be able to make the revenues that we needed to be able to host our programs and services. We are in a position going into the new fiscal year where we believe we have the fiscal ability through revenues and the return to activities in our parks and recreation facilities to do more subsidized programs. So offer the free after-school youth sports program, host 4 concerts in the park at Chase Pond Park in the month of July, and then also having the staff capacity to support sports leagues, field reservations, and indoor and outdoor facility rentals. Through the pandemic, we lost staff as a result of downsizing due to the pandemic, and then also transition of staff that went into other places. And we've been slowly, very slowly, restaffing our department, but doing it with an eye to make sure that the staffing that we have can provide the services, and most importantly, when we talk about our revenues, that we are paying our staff a wage that attracts them to come work for the city of Santa Barbara. Just like other organizations, it's harder and harder to find people willing to work at the wages they were working at pre-COVID. And so we have a strategy to increase those hourly salaries to support our hourly staff. Indoor sports, again, with the ease of restriction, we're seeing more and more of that. And then lastly, the Children's Fiesta Parade, although it won't be on State Street because State Street's closed, but bringing that back. And that's a program that the city Parks and Recreation Department has hosted since its inception. Just recreation, mentioned some of our priority projects for parks. For recreation, expanding our youth apprentice program, again, exiting pandemic conditions, launching the Summer Nights program, and that's a program that will be held Wednesday through Saturday at La Cumbre Junior High in collaboration with the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Free after-school sports to serve 850 kids. Hopefully with the new school year, we'll be able to do that. Our recreation after-school program suffered this year, even though kids were back in school, because we didn't have the staffs to support it as much as families really wanted it. So we're hoping that we'll be in a better position next year. And then also reopening our 5 community centers. So since the pandemic began, first of all, we shut everything down and then slowly opened things on an as-needed basis. But we haven't been back to our regular operations since the pandemic. And part of the challenge we've had in this fiscal year is a lack of financial resources to do that and a lack of staffing to do that. So again, our community centers will be reopening close to what we used to have pre-pandemic. Administration, very quickly, who do? We advance park and recreation facility renovations, addressing policy issues like park safety and park rules, providing departmental administration and policy oversight, and then leveraging sources of funds beyond the general fund to advance our programs and services and capital projects. Priority projects for the administration division, developing a public art policy in our city parks. Something we've been noodling around for quite some time. We have art of various forms in city parks, but no guiding policy around that. And that's something that we need to tackle. Other cities have done that. It's something we need to approach. We need a new joint use agreement with Santa Barbara Unified School District. And then we also need to step back and do a full asset inventory of our park system and develop a comprehensive reinvestment plan. We know a lot about it, but we haven't really gathered the data in a comprehensive way and being able to plan out, hopefully, the next 10 to 20 years. We set aside our open space management plans with the pandemic and the loss of staff, restarting that with new staff coming on board. And then in our capital, actually, these are projects that we hope will be finished by the end of next fiscal year, so they're under construction, and I'll speak more to those in upcoming slides. So general fund budget overview, if we could go to the next slide. Looking at where we were when we started fiscal year 22, this table is a format that we'll be using for council, so we want the commission to see it as well. When the budget was adopted in June of last year, the general fund budget was just under $18 million. And we do a 2-year plan. So at that time, we anticipated that we would have a budget of $19 million in fiscal year 23 with a return to normal, more normal operations post-pandemic. That was our projection this time last year. Through the development of the budget that we have before you today, we've adjusted that and are actually proposing a general fund budget of $21.3 million. And you can see where the adjustments lie in our expenditures, largely in recreation, a little bit in administration, and then also parks. Some of these adjustments are coming just through the normal budget process, and they don't have anything to do with decision-making on the part of the cost to employ and provide benefits to city staff increases. And so we get some adjustment already, and then we do more adjustments based on the programs and services that we're offering and the revenues that we anticipate may come forward. When we look at the Parks Division, what does that mean? Just over $9 million. Parks operations is 6.9. Beach maintenance, just under 160. Medians and parkways, which also includes the work we do for the Public Works Department at Sheffield, and then forestry, which is largely street trees, but then also all of our park tree maintenance. And in recreation, much more diverse pie, as you can see, just over $10 million recreation expense budget. And when you look at it, you can see that youth activities and facilities and special events are almost at the 1.6 million. Aquatics is our largest program budget at 2.1, and that has a lot to do with Los Baños Pool, the cost to run and operate the pool. And then when you go into our other programs, you can see smaller ones, and again, it depends on the size of the program and also the maintenance and operations of each one of those facilities. So embedded in these numbers is salary and benefits, supplies and services, and what's called allocated costs. So we have allocations for building maintenance, we have allocations for building renewal, computer, IT support, insurance. All of the things that you need to sort of run a facility are actually embedded in those numbers. When we look at our budget, some of the numbers, it doesn't really affect our bottom line going into the new year, but it is associated with our operations. We have two vacant 0.8, I should say 0.8 FTE, a pool technician and a head pool lifeguard. The head pool lifeguard position has been left vacant for quite some time to save cost. And then our pool technician position was vacated recently. Our proposal is actually to take those two positions and create a full-time equivalent aquatic specialist. So not only will the individual be able to maintain our pool systems, because we have the tech that's there every day to make sure everything's working, whether it's Ortega, Los Baños, or in the summertime also the Oak Park wading pool, but we also have a need for lifeguard support. So putting those two together, proposing a FTE aquatic specialist, that means we actually reduce our full-time equivalents for the department by 0.6 in order to get to that. So we're creating that savings. In our community services program, we have an admin specialist position that's been vacant for a number of years. It went vacant pre-pandemic and was left vacant to save a cost. Reclassifying it as a recreation specialist to provide more support for our community services programs, whether it's community gardens, food distribution, youth apprentice, broadening that job title. And then in our parks division, I'm pleased to report that we have successfully finally recruited our 4th park ranger. It's a challenging position to recruit for. It's something we've been working on for a number of years. We now have 4 park rangers. They are critical to the operations and safety of our park system. And we have one position that's a lead park ranger who generally and often oversees weekend staff, and then also provides a lead support to the other park ranger. Converting that to a supervising park ranger actually consolidates that work group together, as well as relieves some of the burden on the park supervisors for having to oversee park maintenance staff on the weekends. The supervising park ranger would take that on. So departmental revenues, again, looking at this table, you can see the adopted budget was just over 5.7 million. We anticipated an uptick in revenue for the fiscal year 23 to almost 6.4. We're proposing adjustments of just over 1.264. So we're revising our recommended revenue budget significantly over what we thought we would be doing this time last year. Part of it has to do with we've definitely had a return of facility rentals, so we're seeing that revenue increase. Part of it has to do with we have a restaurant at the Cabrillo Pavilion that's performing really well and generating more revenue than we projected. And part of it has to do with fees and the cost to provide programs and services and increasing fees in order to cover those costs. So where you see an increase in expense, you see or corresponding increase in revenue. We're not asking for any more funds from the general fund. It's not new money to the department. It's money we're generating through our programs and services because we need to be able to provide those services, pay for the staff, address our increasing costs. In the Parks Division, there's a slight adjustment, and that has to do with an increase in the utility users tax revenue that will be used to trim street trees as well as take care of vegetation in parkways and medians. And then looking very quickly at our revenue budgets to give the commission an orientation, recreation programming and facility rentals make up the bulk of that. When you look at our beach lifeguard reimbursement, that comes from the Waterfront Department. The Waterfront Department reimburses us for a portion of the costs to operate beach lifeguards on the beach during the summer. We also have grants and donations Interdepartmental transfers is really that utility users, actually, yes, utility users tax. And then a few other things, rents, for example, are nonprofit leases in our community centers and other rental income. And then revenue by program, very quickly, again, you can see forestry, just under $1 million in UUT revenue for street trees. Grounds and facility maintenance, that's services we provide that are not parks. They address services provided to other departments, and same thing with medians and parkways. And in our recreation division, that gives you a good picture of where the funds come in, with the bulk of it in facilities and special events, followed by aquatics, youth activities, active adults, sports, community services, and then tennis and pickleball. So that brings us to fees, and for this year, I have a little bit of a change on this slide, but we do have 186 recreation program and facilities fees. You did receive our fees and charges document, which leads me to, I neglected to mention, the city switched to OpenGov for its budget this year. It happened rather rapidly, and so we were scrambling at the end to try to figure out how to give the commission paper. We unfortunately weren't in a position to be able to give you a PDF of our budget document. However, the fees and charges are not in OpenGov yet, so we were able to provide that in paper to you. But essentially for our fees, and let me just double check because I had to make a quick change just to make sure I give you the accurate information. We actually have 4 new fees, not 10. We're discontinuing 9 fees, and we are making increases or decreases to 89 fees. So we do this every year, and we do it based on cost recovery, participation, competition, community benefit, our target markets, and the flexibility that we need for fee applications. The next slide gives you a general sense of some of the ones, what that means when we say a 3% increase in youth camps. It can range from 50 cents to $5 a day. Junior guards, $1.33 per day. Adult lap swim, 60 cents a swim. Adult sports leagues, $2.50 a game. Youth and adult tennis lessons, just over $3. And pickleball permit fees, going up 19%, but that's $11 a year. So when you look at that spread, you get a general sense of, why is it? What are we trying to do? Offset our operating costs. We have new camp offerings. Water and chemicals, that's the other thing. In addition to water costs going up, we need water to operate our programs. In our pool, we need chemicals to operate our pool. Those costs go up, and we're not getting additional funds, general fund allocation, so we need to make it up in fees. Departmental budget reductions. There are some structural issues with the city's general fund budget overall. For fiscal year 23, the approach that the city administrator is proposing is that we address some of those budgetary revenue issues through some expense reductions, anticipated savings, salary and benefits as positions vacate and get filled over the course of the year. We end up with savings, and then a use of reserves. And so Parks and Recreation was asked to reduce its expense budget by just over $110,000. We have had a vacant recreation program manager position for 4 years, which started as a result of the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation and has been held vacant because of the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation, the loss of revenue while that building was closed for 2 years, and then the pandemic. We are proposing to keep it vacant until January of next year. Our staff are bursting at the seams in terms of their responsibilities, so we do recommend that we do fill that finally, but it facilitates us moving forward with our programs in the first half of the year, and in all reality, it takes 3 to 4 months to actually recruit someone to the position, so we get those savings.
I have a question. Is January soon enough for that position's responsibilities? Because things gear up in the summer, but summer starts with registrations in March, and is January soon enough, or if you don't intend to hire until January, should it be recruited for in November?
Sure, thank you. Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, yes, we would probably initiate the recruitment in October with the idea that it would be filled by the beginning of the new calendar year. It's often hard to bring someone in right before a holiday season. And when we get to the new calendar year, we're halfway through the fiscal year, and we are launching straight into planning and programming for summer programs, plus any other myriad of activities that we're doing in the department. We think it's feasible. We have a really strong bench in our recreation division in terms of our supervisors, our current recreation manager, a lot of experience. And so someone coming in new will be able to ride those coattails initially and then get fully up to speed during the summer. Then very briefly, general fund capital. Our capital improvement program, we do a 5-year program every 2 years. So what we're showing for fiscal year '23 is the second year. So we did sort of an overhaul going into fiscal year '22. We'll do another overhaul next fall, this fall, I should say, and we'll be presenting a new larger capital program to the commission in probably November of this year. But when you look at what the need is in Parks and Recreation, it's around $1.2 billion. We have a lot of facilities, a lot of parks, and a lot of deferred maintenance. It could be community buildings, sports facilities, it could be park renovations. When we propose projects, we are focused on the use, the public benefit, the condition of the facility, particularly if there's safety issues. Accessibility improvements are key to everything we do in our programs. And then we also have plenty of community demand. So ferreting out how to meet the highest community demand. And then also the opportunity for long-term benefit. So when we go in and do a capital project, the idea is we're not going back there for a really long time except for general maintenance. So when we get it done, it's done. So for next year, the projects that we have proposed are beginning the planning and design to renovate Plaza Veracruz. We have our license agreement with the Santa Barbara Trapeze in place, but over the course of the next year or so, we need to ask the community how they would like that park to be functioning for their use. Our park infrastructure safety program, that goes for just about anything, whether it's a bench, a gate, a fence, lighting, picnic tables, just basic needs that are never budgeted in our operating budget. Playground replacement is something that we always have budgeted, and for the next year, our approach will be actually to go in and do minor refurbishments in a lot of playgrounds rather than taking one out completely and putting a new one in. We have a goal, we had a goal of replacing them every 10 to 12 years. Playground structures are better made today than they were 15 years ago, and so depending on the location and how much use they get, they're lasting longer. But we do need to go in and do refurbishments, whether it's to the rubber or replace a piece of equipment. So we'll be focusing those funds in that way. Dwight Murphy Field renovation, those funds will be used to complete the final design and construction documents. And then I mentioned earlier, when it says urban forest management plan implementation, we have a very robust urban forest management plan that council adopted in 2014. This focus of this funds is a fraction of what we need, but it's a good start, and we are really focusing on addressing deferred maintenance. Other capital projects, again, continuing and getting through our final design and construction documents for Ortega Park, renovating the Mesa Park restroom. That was in the capital program for this year, and actually the funding was used instead to help support the plaza, Library Plaza construction, so it's being put back in our capital program. Franceschi Park renovation, those were funds that were removed at the beginning of the pandemic to save money for the city, so they're getting returned to the capital program. Carrillo Gym, this is a very exciting project. It's actually partially funded this year. The goal here is that we'll be under construction to do really important facade safety repairs, a new roof, new fencing around the roof, better lighting, painting, new windows. It's been probably long overdue for more than 30 years at this facility. And then the Louise Lowry Davis Center renovation, we had enough funds to do the exterior. Now we're asking for funds to do the interior so that when we are finally done, the Davis Center will be ready for long-term community use. And then just because it always comes up, these are projects that we're already working on that will continue in the next year, whether it's Eastside Neighborhood Park, the Wisteria Arbor at Chase Palm Park, the Chumash Cultural Project at Ambassador Park, also West Beach Playground, and then Plaza Del Mar bandshell renovation. And that is the extent of an overview, really, very quick overview of the general fund. We tried to give you a staff report that had more detail, so we can go back and forth between the two. And then hopefully the commission had the opportunity to delve into OpenGov. There are a couple of snafus in that data, but it does give you a picture of what's going on too.
Okay. Before we move on to Mr. Benson, do you want to hold off on all questions, or should we take, do you want to take some
At the
others?
discretion of the chair, we could have Cameron Benson do Creeks, and you could ask questions there, and then he can be released if you'd like.
There's itchy fingers on all sides of me. So what I'm thinking is, can you hold off and the trade-off is that as people amass lists of questions, it becomes kind of a bombardment at the end. But
Sure.
If you,
And I might recommend that
you're
we
okay
do
with that,
the
we'll-
Creeks Fund, and you ask questions specific to Creeks, and then we could circle back to general fund or go on to golf.
yeah, okay, so we'll just, are you guys comfortable holding off? Okay, great, thanks.
Hi, thank you, Chair McGill and Commissioners. My name is Cameron Benson. I'm the Creeks Division Manager, and this evening I'll be presenting the proposed FY23 Creeks Division budget. As you all know, most of the funding for the Creeks Division comes through Measure B, which is a voter-approved hotel bed tax, a 2% increment in the hotel bed tax. And it's placed into a special fund that is restricted to pay for stormwater and surface water quality improvement and creek restoration projects and programs. The Creeks Division receives no funding from the city's general fund, and the proposed budget is consistent with Measure B as well as the Creeks Fund program funding guidelines. Next slide, please. Program highlights for the Creeks Division FY23 include some key capital project milestones. We're getting to the point where we think we're going to be able to implement our water quality improvement and restoration project at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. We'll probably be in construction or implementation of that project in September and October of this calendar year. We're on track to complete a final design of a creek restoration project on Mission Creek in Oak Park. And similarly, we will complete at least conceptual design for a creek restoration water quality improvement project on Lower Mission Creek. So that's just downstream of State Street. And then finally, we will be doing a water quality public opinion survey in the next fiscal year. That is part of our city's stormwater discharge permit. So it's a requirement for the water board, and every 5 years we go out and kind of gauge how our outreach programs are doing in terms of effectiveness, educating people about non-point source pollution, ocean water pollution, and behaviors that people can engage in to try to improve water quality in the city. Okay, and getting to the numbers, I'll start with our revenues for FY23. Revenue projections for the coming fiscal year are about $4.85 million. Those projections come from the finance department. As you can see, that's a fairly significant bump from the adopted FY22 budget. It's that number, the 3.9 million, has increased over the years. We've seen the hotel industry and tourism bounce back up after the pandemic, or coming out of the pandemic. Finance has adjusted the number from the original two-year budget by $426,000. So moving in the right direction. We can see that from FY22 to adopted to the recommended budget, it's an $800,000 jump. So that looks like a lot. It's really getting us back to pre-pandemic numbers. So or in line and a little bit above, say, FY19 numbers. Next slide, please. On our expenditure side, the proposed FY23 budget is substantially similar to our FY22 budget. There are a few exceptions. Most notably, you can see on the transfer to capital line, the second line from the bottom, we have about a $625,000 increase from the current fiscal year capital transfer to the current year. That's just getting us back towards what we normally do. And as we move into the next few years in our 5-year capital program, we're looking at that number continuing to increase, and will be around the $2 million range. So we're sort of bouncing back out of the reductions that we did because of the pandemic and the decreasing revenue. I just wanted to say that the expenses at 4.86 million, very close to the balanced budget with our revenues. We're looking at moving $12,000 or so from our reserve fund into our, in order to balance the budget. So very close on our revenues and expenditure forecast. Next slide, please. This table breaks down the Creeks Division main programs by program area. So you can see where our operating funds are going in our budget. 50% of the operating expenditures are for water quality, 24% for creek restoration, and 26% for community outreach and education. Next slide, please. And this is a table listing the Creeks Division's capital improvement program funding planned for FY 2023. And that lists all of the projects that we're putting money into. That goes for, those funds go to the planning and the design and permitting and then implementation of the project over the next several years. A couple that I would just like to highlight, I mentioned earlier, the Lower Mission Creek Restoration Project is moving forward. We're going into design in the next fiscal year on that restoration project. Mission Creek Restoration at Oak Park, we're working on conceptual design now, and we'll work through final design in the coming year. And then, as I mentioned, the Bird Refuge is a project we've been working on for a long, long time. The city's been working on that project for close to 100 years, and we think we're actually going to be able to go forward with that this year and hopefully really improve our water quality in the Bird Refuge. Next slide, please. This chart shows the funding sources for our capital improvement program. As you can see, most of the funding for our program comes through Measure B funds, but we do try to do our best to leverage that money every year. Some years, you can see we've really been able to be successful with grant funding. Other years are more challenging. All of the grant funding that the Creeks Division is pursuing are all competitive grant funds, and so we're competing usually with people from around the state and around the country for those funds, and we'll continue to be pretty aggressive in pursuing grant funds. When you see the years with smaller numbers, a lot of times that's just what funds are available, what grant programs are funded, and also what projects we have coming up. They really have to be teed up, as you know, in order to make yourself eligible and competitive for that funding. And since the beginning of the Creeks Division, 2001, we've been able to secure over $20 million in grant funding. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the trend with our Creeks Fund reserve. The purpose of the unappropriated reserve in the Creeks Division is for capital projects, grant matches, and for revenue shortfalls. The Creeks Advisory Committee funding policy or funding target is approximately $3 million. As you can see, we hover around that. Over the last several years, we've been right at it. We've dipped down when we needed funds, and we're currently projecting to be at about $4.4 million at the end of this year. The small proposed use of reserves this year won't really affect that balance very much. But it is important to note that we have a couple of capital projects moving forward in the next couple of years that will likely require some acquisition funding. And when we do that, we usually are borrowing money. We try to prepare for it as best we can, but we end up borrowing money from our reserves to cover those costs, and that's what makes those restoration projects possible. So it is likely we'll be utilizing that number, and the balance will come down closer to our reserve target or even below. And then also, as I mentioned, our 5-year capital program envisions higher transfers into capital over the next couple of years, and that will offset that increase in our reserve fund. So with that, I will wrap up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
We can either do questions now or just go through golf and take an all-in-a-oneer. I'm happy to go either way.
I think we were going to do creeks, and then Mr. Benson could leave.
Oh, you have to, okay, well then
Yeah,
let's just do,
The
that
one thing
case-
I would just add to the presentation around reserves is that they have been used strategically over the years. So where we have the wonderful Arroyo Borough open space, for example, the Palermo property as another example, where we've actually been able to acquire land, which was unheard of years ago, that we would have the ability to do that. And now those Creeks Funds reserves and the Creeks Fund itself have enabled the city to leverage resources from the state to really support the acquisition of some really important, wonderful open spaces in the city.
yeah, Arroyo Borough being one of them. So what I would like to do is we'll open up for people who initially have questions, and then when we get towards the end, I will do a round table just to make sure that everybody's had the opportunity to speak. So I know that Commissioner Longstreet was first, then I know that you, Commissioner Hernandez Barrish, was second, and then we will go from there.
I just have one question. Looking at the budget, the street sweeping, it went from 13,000 to 201,000. Was that when it was suspended, or I know it's been an issue for a couple of years that we were going to be tagged for more street sweeping cost within the Creeks Division. I know there was a bit of controversy over that.
Commissioner McGill, or Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, that was probably my fault. I believe it was a typo when I was creating the table. I took a note. I believe I missed a digit, so the jump is not so great. It's just a mistake on my part.
It did stand out, and I do remember a few
I-
years ago, there was a
I-
lot of talk about,
It jumped right out at me. My apologies for that.
oh, okay, and, okay, that was my question.
So we,
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I'm sorry, I did not catch that. It is a typo. The current year budget is 198,000. So it's an increase from about 198,000 to the 201,630. So much smaller than jumping from 13,000 to 200. It's jumping from just under 200 to just over 200.
Thought maybe we bought a couple of street sweepers.
Equipment, yeah.
so does anybody, just in the interest of Mr. Benson's schedule, does anybody have any questions specifically for Mr. Benson? Commissioner Aldana.
Regarding the bird refuge, because I did see it on the Planning Commission. It looks like a beautiful project. But on the bike lane or walkway, will there be any pedestrian lighting?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, there's no lighting, there's no work on the walkway as part of this project, so there's no lighting or anything along the walkway. The project will involve other elements that are focused on the water quality and wetland.
So concentration is on the
restoration.
water
Yeah.
quality.
Which is, I think, appropriate for
Creeks.
our
Yeah.
funding, yeah. Thanks.
I thought it was a complete project. That's why I asked. Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Benson? Okay. I'm glad you clarified a bit on the water quality survey, because I circled that one and said, okay, and I still have the question, what do you think a resulting action would be from that survey? I mean, what does that change, that survey every 5 years?
Yeah, thank you, Chair McGill. As you can see, our outreach and education component is a significant component of our program. I mean, it's 26% of our operating budget. And the reason for that is the water pollution issues we have in the city of Santa Barbara, like cities all across the country and the world, frankly, is what's called non-point source pollution. It's urban runoff pollution. And so it's a pollution source that's not just a factory with a pipe discharging some kind of toxic chemical into our waterways. It's runoff coming off of our streets. So it's sort of all of us, right? And so we do a lot of outreach and education to explain to people what those pollution sources are and what kind of behaviors, picking up after your pet, for example, and not dumping oil into the street or into the gutters. Things, just simple things that people can do in terms of behavioral changes that will help improve our runoff water quality. And so one of the things that we do is we get that information, and it kind of helps us to see where people's understanding of those issues are. We usually try to drill down with some questions in a survey like that to see what kind of messages are going to be the most effective, what segments of the community are we missing, so that as the Creeks Division updates its public education plan, which is now an annual, something that we update annually, it helps us to guide our messaging and our spending in terms of public service announcements on television, radio, and other electronic media. And so we can utilize that information to try to make our outreach program as effective as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I think with that, why don't we finish up with the Golf Fund, then we'll open it up for general questions, see if there's any public comment, and then do a round of comments. And then at the end of the day, we need to make a recommendation. All right? Thank you, Cameron.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, thank you. My name is Tina Nelson, and I'm the business manager for with Parks and Recreation, and this is my first time presenting for the budget. So the Golf Fund is an enterprise fund for the city of Santa Barbara, which is dedicated to providing residents and visitors an affordable and exceptional experience golfing in a friendly, inclusive, and beautiful environment. It pays for itself. The Golf Fund takes no money from the general fund, and it is a sustaining enterprise for the city of Santa Barbara and part of our Parks and Recreation Department. Next slide. Highlights for this program are to maintain a great value for the money. We present the budget with the understanding that we would be experiencing typical weather for our region. We are committed to investing in maintenance and renewal for the golf course, maintaining excellent customer service standards and providing that to the people the community members that come to the golf course. We're committed to a robust capital program and also to sustain higher rounds and continue to promote increased usage and participation at the golf course. Our priorities this year are to increase our greens and cart fee revenues, to manage and maintain potable water consumption, reinvest in the golf course infrastructure, increase our non-financial measures, maintain high customer service scores again, and to also grow preferred card numbers, which it helps build return use of community members to the golf course and to build that lasting and growing customer base. Department revenues are, from our original plan, have grown. We have continued to benefit from increased use at the golf course. Golf remains a popular sport as we are coming out of the pandemic, and many people that return to the golf course also, we've seen new community members take up the sport as well, and that has continued to sustain itself, and so we are projecting slight increases in the number of paid rounds used. So you'll see that from the original plan in 2023, there's some growth, almost just shy of $500,000, with a recommended revenue budget of $3.8 million, largely from golf fees and charges, which include cart fees, merchandise, green fees, and lessons, things like that. We have recommended fee changes for this year, slight increases in our green fees, $1 to $3 increases, $1 increase in our cart fees, and $1 increase in the size of small and medium buckets, and then to slightly increase the range value key, which is similar to a preferred card membership where you can pay a monthly rate to come to the driving range and either have a small bucket or large bucket, and that would be like a monthly membership, and it's a good value. In proposing these fees, we did do some market research and assessed what we consider to be our competitive golf courses in the area. The column that says non-applicable is Rancho San Marcos, which continues to be closed. But really, the two closest golf courses within our footprint would be Glen Annie Golf Club and Sandpiper. So you can see that even with the proposed increases in our fees, that Santa Barbara Golf Club continues to be the best value in our area for golf. Things that we did take into consideration as we approached this was that we want to maximize participation in the golf course within our target market and to be competitive, to provide community benefits, to also address the labor and water cost increases with the increase in the minimum wage jumping another $1 to $15 an hour, and with the rate increases that we're facing with water costs and also capital needs. Next slide, please. As you can see, our golf fund expenditures, they did increase slightly. Salaries and benefits, supplies and services, allocated costs, and we do have some debt at the golf course, so we have that as a fee. And then we have capital outlay charges that we invest in to reinvest in the golf course. So you'll see that the adjustment from the original plan is $133,000. That can be attributed to budgeting for an incentive fee that we pay to our contractor. Prior to COVID, this is not a fee that we had paid because the goal was such that it was not met, but with the continuing success of the golf course, this is something that we paid last year and we are forecasting to pay again this year. So I have included it in the budget for this coming fiscal year for 2023. And this addresses the breakdown of the operating expenses. So you can see with the operating budget that it includes the water cost increase that I mentioned, the cost of the oversight of the golf course to our vendor Courseco that does an excellent job in managing it for us, the capital requirements that to be funded, and minimum wage increases. The lion's share of the expenditure is in the maintenance of the golf course, which is the actual upkeep of the greens and the golf course itself, water costs and such. We also have operational expense management and cost of goods sold and cost of lessons. For our capital program for fiscal year 23, we have budgeted a total of $228,000, but we do forecast or project that we'll have some carryover from capital expenditures from this year. And Corsco had committed to a 2-year, $125,000 investment in capital projects at the golf course. So we are projecting that for fiscal year '23, that we will have $560,000 to reinvest in the golf course across course improvements, some much-needed infrastructure renewal, and some power turf equipment that's necessary that's been overdue for replacing as well. And lastly, we have our golf reserves trends. As we were entering into the pandemic, we were below reserve policy targets. And again, with the return, really with the resurgence in golf due to the COVID pandemic, we were actually able to restore the golf course reserve policy, and currently are above reserves by $1.5 million, and we are projecting that we will be to closer to $2.5 million by the end of the next fiscal year. Thank you. That concludes my
Good note,
presentation.
Tay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's go Christmas shopping. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director Zachary. Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Great presentation. It's, God, after the last couple of years, this almost seems like a bubbly, upbeat budget presentation. I would like to open it up for questions. I think I'll just open it, and just as people have questions, we'll ask them, and if it looks like we need to, I can go down the line. So I know you had a question that you had been waiting for, so I'll start with you.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for Ms. Zachary. As you know, the band shell is my heart project. You have here in your notes about the band shell permits for its reconstruction are issued potentially next month, but that the construction will not begin until fall. Is that correct? Or is that a typo?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Anand-Laberge, it's not a typo. Generally, when we receive a building permit, we then need to actually put together the bid documents and the specifications for construction, and then that goes out to bid, and the bidding process can often take up to 2 months. So that's why the fall is, I think, a reasonable goal. It would be nice to get it done earlier. I would add that we think we're almost at our full construction costs in terms of fundraising. So hopefully we will be in a position to put it out to bid and cross our fingers and toes that we cross the finish line.
If it goes as projected with your plan here, when would the park be available for use for community events?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
When would the park be available for use for community events if the timeline here goes forward?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Anand-Laberge, I would be hesitant to give you a date. Ideally, I don't actually have at my fingertips the length of construction time, but for the commission's benefit, next month we'll have more details. It's a pretty big repair job, and then also we're adding an accessible ramp around the edge of the building, so there's construction. Maybe it's an 8 to 10 week project, which means it might be 12. And again, a lot of it really depends on what the bids are, how the contractor likes to do the work. Clearly, we hopefully would not have to, as much as we want rain, we don't want rain when we're under construction. So factoring all of those things in, I think it would be safe to say the beginning of the new calendar year.
Thank you.
Commissioner Longstreet, I know you had a question earlier.
Yeah, and if you're ready, first off, I hope we could get a copy of what you had today, because it made a whole lot more sense than what I saw online. I went onto the site, and I've got to say, I hated it. I can't tell how many hourly positions we have. You know, until tonight, where are we taking cuts? How do we compare to years past? For, 25 years, I've advocated for parks, and I know we're always down in our staffing. We've never recovered our staffing, ever. And then I'm reading, we're going to do the bathrooms twice a day, and we've got beds to renew. We've got a lot to do in our parks, and we know it. How are we standing with our full-time, our full-time equivalents, then our hourlies, and, our parks? We always speak about police and fire being 7 days a week. We need to speak of parks as being 7 days a week also. So, one of the great things we got out of the golf course also is we have our new parks manager, and I'm really happy for that. That was a benefit that came through all of the difficulties of the golf course transition. So welcome, thank you. So tell me a little bit about where we're standing with our park staffing.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Longstreet, we prioritized filling our parks positions at the beginning of this calendar year over all of other positions in the department. And so as a result, we've been fairly successful in terms of our recruitments. We currently have a recruitment underway for 2 park supervisors, 1 position that Simone Herrera vacated, and then we also had a retirement. Our intent moving forward is to keep all of those positions into the new fiscal year. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the city is facing some longer-term financial issues that will require further evaluation of revenue sources, because there are some areas in the city where we've not kept up with generating revenue that we could have, as well as looking at operational efficiencies. Parks and Recreation is the poster child for operational efficiencies, in that we could not do what we do for recreation if we did not have all of those agreements and third-party contractors and co-sponsorships. I mean, it's really an amazing feat. We just orchestrate it all, and we put on a couple of programs ourselves. With the Parks Division, it's a little different, and I think what you see in our budget is when you look at the Parks Division budget and you carve out what we do for the street right-of-ways, and you carve out what we do for other departments, it's not as big as it looks. And so if we were to do anything, it would be looking at, and we also rely on contractor support for a portion of our landscape maintenance, a portion of our tree maintenance. I don't see that changing. The challenge we have is the cost of a city employee is growing. And then how do you balance that with the service provided, and how to be as efficient and as effective as we can? So right now, we're not adding park staff, but we are trying to make sure that every position has a staff member in it, which is will continue to be a priority going into the new year.
Good. I mean, I know we're getting hit with water and all the fertilizer. It just doesn't matter what you talk about right now. It's going up. The other day, and our parks have had some heavy impacts from the social situation, that we're facing all over the state. So I just, I feel strongly that we need to advocate to keep our parks and our parks employees, and make sure that we can do what we need to do for the community, because it's often overlooked. Now, my other question, as I'm looking at it, it's really, and this is hard for me because we don't even have those comparisons to past years. That's a tough one. Do we need to be advocating for these capital funds? We had a lot of capital funds removed for a variety of reasons, and readjusted and all kinds of things. And our list never gets any shorter. So as we're making our comments to council, it's important to me that we keep moving forward on these capital projects. We see the benefits both with the Carrillo Rec Center and with the Cabrillo Arts Center on what it means to restore these buildings for community use and how they can help us to support the other things we need to do in Parks and Rec. So how secure do you feel in this? Well, that's probably a bad question. Do you feel we need to advocate strongly as a commission for our capital projects that we have this list of?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Longstreet, the reinvestment in parks and recreation facilities has been a priority of this department for a high priority for over a decade. And yes, we have gained and lost funds more often than we care to count. You know, the repair of Thousand Steps is finally happening, but we started talking about it 20 years ago. So I think that the key that we have, the key argument and advocacy that we make, and we sit down with all departments, because there's a lot of needs throughout the city, it's not just us, is what facilities are used by the public, that the public needs better access to, better use of, better conditions. And unlike an office building or something else, we have a lot of public use of our buildings. And so keeping those buildings up or renewing those buildings is critically important. And doing it with an eye, and then same thing with parks, with an eye that it's a 30-year achievement that we're trying to achieve. When we do complete the band shell, not only are we restoring a landmark structure of historic significance, we're bringing it into the 21st century with the kind of electrical service and the access and all the other needs that we need, well, all the other things we need to provide to the community today. That's where our capital reinvestment's really important. The same thing with the Davis Center is when we hopefully get done that interior renovation, it'll be good to go for 30 years. So it's not just a patch job, it's not just a fix-it, it's with the eye to the future. And that's the argument and the rationale that staff makes. So certainly, if the commission supports that, that's another way to go. And we have a lot of deferred maintenance, but we are knocking things off the list, I would add.
And I think the reality is you work hard and you knock things off the list, but we maintain most of the buildings in the city of Santa Barbara. I look at Alameda Park, and I think there's a park that, is in desperate need. It's a historic park in desperate need of attention. So I know it's not going to happen in the next few years because I did read the city administrator's budget document. I would just encourage my fellow commissioners, to also advocate if you have personal relationships with city council members. I think that really, the questions, I just really do want this PowerPoint because it'll help me to focus in a way I know how. The new stuff doesn't always work so well in my brain. Thank you.
I have some, I'm not seeing any, but I have some questions. I will maybe, and some of mine are kind of very related to what Commissioner Longstreet has been asking. So maybe I'll go ahead and ask and then do a sweep around the table again, and then we'll see what comments we might have from the public, if any, and then do a wrap-up. So I'm going to kind of swing around to the park staffing conversation. It's basically the same question, maybe try to ask it a little bit differently. I look at it, the 6.5 full-time positions, if I'm reading my slides correctly, 23 bathrooms, 22 playgrounds, 23 bathrooms 2 times a day. Seems kind of daunting, which then triggered the question, yes, it's a more upbeat budget discussion in terms of where we've been over the last couple of years, but when you really think about it in terms of what you want to and think you need to achieve for providing service to the community. What areas do you think you are most understaffed in? And then what, I mean, I'll say, what do you lose sleep over, but what's not happening with this budget and this level of staffing that really you think should be happening? And again, this helps with advocacy, which is where we need to take, as a commission, need to take this going forward.
That's,
Yeah,
Chair
I
Miguel, that's a
know.
huge question.
I know.
Because I think, we had a presentation this morning, we had a manager-supervisor meeting, and the presenter said he's never met a department director that didn't say they didn't need more staff, right? I think what we've been facing historically, and then more intensely during the pandemic, which was exacerbated by the staffing challenges that we had and significant concern over people's health and safety, our staff's health and safety under those conditions, is that we as a city are rich in open space on a lot of levels, but it's super diverse. It's not a cookie cutter Orange County park system. And so because of that, it requires different levels of attention depending on what park you're in. And so we could always say, for example, having more staff resources, even in our open space parks, would be wonderful, right? If we were more able to manage our tree canopies in our open space parks to grow more natives, and but those turn into capital projects. There are things we can't do as a matter of day-to-day operations that would be longer view work efforts. They have to be very focused, capital planning, management. That's not uncommon for other park operations. So if we were to say where we were undersourced, I think it really would be park staff, because we don't have enough staff. And we can speak to, on the north side, at one point, I think we had a team of one showing up for the beachfront during COVID, depending on whether people were taking care of their families, whether they were sick, whether something else was happening. So we don't have a lot of depth. And so when we start losing people, we get spread super thin. And then also, I think one of the things that we've strived to do is focus our staff on areas where it's really important for staff to do the work. And Simone can speak to the turf renewal work that he's initiated in his initial few months in his parks manager position. We don't want to hire somebody to do that. That's a staff-intensive work. So if we put a bunch of staff on that, what's not getting done somewhere else? So that's the juggling that we have to make. And so then the question is, well, how would you increase that resource? We have in the past increased it through contracts because we can rely on that. But again, I think if you remember from the initial part, one of the things we do need to do is do a comprehensive inventory of our park assets and the condition of those assets. And once we have that, we'll be better able to explain and speak to the need and how long it might take for us to catch up. Hopefully that's helpful. And I'd be happy to have Jasmine or Simone jump in if they have anything else to add.
I would add one thing, that the park restroom performance measure that you're looking at, we actually had a metric previously that was something like clean 786 restrooms annually, and realized that what we were trying to get at is we aim to clean every restroom twice a day. We've been doing that for years. So it's actually not a new metric, it's just revised so that it really speaks and tells the story better. And then what we end up doing, and I'm sure you all see it when you're in the park system, we really prioritize cleanliness and safety. So what ends up happening is we're ending up taking less care of landscape, less care on turf, because we want to make sure that those restrooms are clean, that there are no safety dangerous issues in a park. But, so what we're missing and what we can use with more staff is bringing back the quality of the landscape and turf.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Mr. Herrera, do you?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, one of the things I'd like to add is just on the last project that we just completed, which is the Mesa Park, we spent 630 hours within a period of 3 or 4 days. Now you can imagine 630 hours, what things went undone. You know, we did clean the restrooms, but all the weeding, the weed whipping, we got veg fields going on right now. We gotta get through that before June 15th. So every time before we start taking on any of these projects, we're already looking at what are we not gonna do? Who do we take? Do we take from the beach side? Do we take from the north side? Do we take from islands and medians? Where are we gonna get these people to come from, and what areas are we not gonna do? And moving forward, we wanna continue renovating all these parks. A lot of them will be park renovation. A lot of them will just be turf renovation, so it'll be a little less. And when do we do it? You know, we know that the best time to do it is in the fall. But right now, it just happened that we had a little money, and we were able to do this project. We want to do them in the fall, but we can't do too many in the fall. We can only do one at a time. So this is what we're facing at this time. You know, we want to do all these restorations, but then at the same time, a lot of areas are going to go undone. And that's where the contractors will come in. In the last couple of years, the contractors were not able to come in and help us. We gave them projects, but they didn't have the manpower. They're having trouble hiring people themselves.
Yeah, thank you.
So if I could maybe add a little bit to that too. Each one of our parks is assigned a level of service. So how many times we're there and why we're there. And so our focus is often on the highest use, most visible parks, which makes sense. So we do then field from members of the community concern about maintenance standard at Franceschi Park, for example, the maintenance standard at Hale Park, the maintenance standard at other parks. They fall lower on the list and they get less attention. With more resources, they'd get more attention and the level of service would go up. So that's maybe also another way to explain how we manage with the resource that we have, because that's basically what we do. We manage with what we have, and we try to make the most strategic decisions about where to allocate resources based on the number of people, safety, cleanliness. You know, restrooms are wonderful, but they take labor, right? So you think about, you know, an open space park without a restroom, well, that's okay. It has garbage cans. Okay, we can do that. You know, so part of it is the degree of development of the park also dictates the demand on staff resources, and also dictates how we leverage contract resources, because in some cases, having a contractor support whatever the staff work is doing is exactly what's appropriate in that situation. We wouldn't say we want staff instead of a contractor, if that makes sense. But there are areas that definitely don't get the kind of attention that they could get if we had more staff or a way to allocate additional resources, whether it's staff or something else.
Yeah.
And the reason I raise it is big renovation projects where you can go out with the park foundation or whatever and generate funds, get a lot of visibility. The recreation program gets a lot of visibility because it's so obvious, it's out there, it's got the counselors. What doesn't, in my mind, get the visibility, I would say it warrants and needs, is that what I call it the backbone of the department, the day-to-day operations of keeping this stuff maintained and going. And that's, you know, when I'm looking at advocacy, it kind of is running in at status quo, where really, you know, it feels like there's a conversation about what's missing and what the community isn't seeing necessarily that's so important that I would think would be important to bring to council. I mean, I'll be honest, when I started thinking about this was a few months ago, and I was out at the bird refuge on the platform, you know, away, and one of your staff came in pounding signs into the mud because people were starting to wander under the mud and were in danger of getting stuck and needing to be rescued. Aside from the conversation of, are you serious? But then it was like, well, that person who had to spend however much time pounding signs, basically saying, don't be stupid, was not doing something else. And that not doing something else probably had a greater benefit to more people. And that, it's just a real knock-on that I just don't think, I question whether council is really aware of it, the community is aware of it, and to me, it's important to try to raise that awareness and advocacy. And with that, oh, I did have I have a question on a completely different tack, so, and then I will, so don't step in the mud in the Mandrake Refuge. Don't be stupid, and it smells bad when it gets like that. So my question is, in terms of the fees, are you seeing any blowback as you go out to the camps and fees in terms of some of these fees going up? And the one that really struck me in a little bit is like, ooh, was I mean, I know it's a small one in the grand scheme of things, but right after we had the conversation about the Veracruz and the trapeze, the fees going up 30%. That struck me as, like, you know, a big increase right after a big conversation about a contract, which is really what triggered me on that one. But then it was like, well, what is the general reaction? And the reason I'm asking the question is that, of course, you're trying to keep a balanced budget as you're increasing services, and a lot of that is dependent on revenue. And if there's a huge blowback from some significant fee increases, it could bite us in the face.
Chair McGill, thank you for that question. We have, I think we've been able to tell the story pretty effectively. You know, we've had to increase our expenses, contractor expenses, supplies, and particularly staffing in order to provide these services. I think you're seeing it everywhere in the community, not just with us. And we've been fortunate that we haven't had a lot of pushback and blowback. We are trying to be really careful in how we set the fees and make sure that it's not going to be something that people really can't sustain. You know, there's no intent of capturing as much as we possibly can. It's really just trying to cover the expense growth that we're seeing. And so we luckily have not seen that kind of blowback that you were wondering about.
And Chair McGill and Commissioners, if I could just add, and Commissioner Longstreet will remember what we did during the economic downturn is we looked at everything we did as a department, and we tried to we came up with a strategy of what types of programs received what level of subsidy. And so part of it is balancing, making sure we have programs that have either no fees or lower fees, because the general fund subsidy, with programs that maybe not so much, in part because they have more cost recovery because of the type of program, whether it's services an adult versus a youth. And then also when we have contractors providing services, they're coming up with these fee changes. It's not something we're coming up with, but if they're going to provide a contracted service in a park and they want to charge X, that's what they want to charge. If there aren't signups, then the program doesn't happen. Does that make sense? So it really depends on whether it's a city run or contractor run, and their costs go up too. During COVID, some of the travel camps, like the surf camp, that cost it's probably the most expensive camp that we provide access to. So we don't operate it, but we provide access to sign up for it and also market it on behalf of the service provider. And so we have a percent break. So when you look at where those revenue comes from, we have agreements with each one of them as to what percent of the revenue they generate actually covers our costs.
Okay, thanks. That other commissioners, I'm only going to twist once more. Okay. If you don't have questions, if you're holding off for comments? No, I got a couple. Okay, well then, I'll go to Commissioner Aldana.
In the beginning of the meeting, you did mention that on the bench shell, there's 45,000 shy currently? I thought I heard you say that.
I said it.
Oh, you said it? Oh, I heard somebody say it, okay. And then also on Ortega Park, the perimeter for sidewalk and parking, a year ago or more, there was a CDBG block grant. Was it received, and are you moving forward with it?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Aldana. So first of all, the 45,000 is based on our projected costs for the band shell. And when the department requested ARPA funds to support that project, they anticipated that the grant applications that were out there would all get received. That hasn't happened yet. So we're continuing to fundraise, and I have confidence that we'll close the gap somehow. As for the sidewalk and parking improvements for Ortega Park, that project did not receive Community Development Block Grant funding back when we made that application, which was in 2021, I think. And we did not resubmit an application this go-round because we were focusing on other projects. Once we have the final design plans and the construction documents for the larger park project, we'll be able to look at how we phase moving forward with that. So how we phase that project, including the sidewalk and parking.
Got it.
So it's currently unfunded.
Got it, thank you. Let me see, and regarding medians, because I received phone calls also from the community, when there's a concern in a certain area, can we just reach out directly to Simone, or who do we?
Yeah, so Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, we don't maintain all the medians in the city.
Right,
We maintain designated medians, and parkways. So parkways being next to the sidewalk, medians being in the middle of the street. We probably maintain all of the medians now, almost all of them. But parkways, we don't maintain every parkway in the
No,
city of Santa Barbara.
got it.
If you want more information about what we do, we can bring that back to the commission and actually show you all the different locations in the city where we maintain medians and
Yeah, that,
parkways.
or at
Be
least.
happy to
yeah.
at least give you that sense, so if someone's unhappy about something, we can find out whether it's our responsibility or
Yeah.
whether there's another place to go.
Yeah, because there's an area where they say, that's streets, no, that's Parks and Rec. There's a big confusion, so I just like to find out who is responsible. And you mentioned utility users tax, and you use it to maintain parkway and median. How much do you receive on the users tax approximately?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, I'll actually ask Tina Nelson to dig up the numbers, but of that program, only a portion of the program is funded from utility users tax. The rest is funded through the general fund. And then, it should be in our revenue information. So just before you, that's actually not the UUT. Is that right? For medians and parkways?
My apologies. UUT dollars received is for medians and parkways, and $264,018.
264.
The total program costs for medians and parkways is $607,000, but that does include the money that is allocated also to maintain the Sheffield Reservoir Park area. So so we would subtract $90,000 from medians and parkways, so $607,000 less $90,000.
510-ish.
Yes.
510.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much.
All right, so before we see if there's any public comment, Commissioner Leslie Buxton, do you have any additional questions? Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Nander-LaBerge? No. And Commissioner Feck?
No, thank you.
And Commissioner Longstreet? No. Okay. And neither do I. So Do we have anybody looking to comment from the public?
We do not.
Okay. With that, I think we'll just do one last loop around, and I will just go this way, and see if there are any additional comments other than has already been made. And then we will need to vote on a recommendation, which I hope you've got something to present to us. We can read. So Commissioner Feck, any comments, please?
Just thank you for a thorough presentation. And I'm very excited about all the summer fun activities going on and the concerts in the park coming back. So it's always like a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
To be included in our comments, I would think it's important that we say that the commission is supportive of programs, the programs aimed at youth. Summer fun, the Youth Apprentice Program, the things that really benefit the children in our community who may not be able to afford some of our more expensive programs or don't have access to other programming. I think it's important also to say that we're concerned about the ability to maintain our parks. With the high cost of water, the increases in salaries, we understand the pressures, but that we need to, as a city, look at our commitment to the community and the maintenance of our open spaces, which we have seen the importance of during the pandemic, and they have received a lot of use. Because those same the turf that you're renovating is where our kids practice soccer. It's where things happen for families, and it's where many of the families in our community celebrate that have no other space. So we really support any way to increase the maintenance in our parks. That also going forward, we need to have a realistic vision of the increase in costs, however that comes around. We've been through tough, this isn't part for the comments, but we went through tough times with the golf course, and there was a creative way out of it. It was tough in that we gave up city employees, although the department maintained. We found jobs for people, but that was hard to do, and I think it's hard to look at contracting out maintenance, and I always see it as a balance. When that next catastrophe hits, your contract workers are not necessarily the guys that are going to come and block the streets and cut the trees and do the things you need done in an immediate fashion. And every one of our workers in the community, that's what they show up for. So we always need to be aware that first responders are not simply police and fire. When there's a microburst, our tree crews are out there, our staff is out there cleaning and maintaining our city. So I am very proud of the work they do, and I am very concerned that we keep that balance of having enough staff to respond to the emergencies that we know are in our future. So that's why I think each and every one of us sit up here, is because we appreciate what we have and we want it to be the best it can be for the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Hernando-Laberge.
No comments. Thank you.
And Commissioner Aldana.
Well, thank you for the presentation. There's a lot that goes on in the department, and we're here to support and let us know how we can help.
And Commissioner Leslie Buxton.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to use all your facilities have really been great, and I really encourage council to keep investing in them. It's so vital for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess, I mean, I don't have a huge amount to add. I mean, I think in terms of the comments from the commission, certainly Commissioner Longstreet summed up a lot of where I'm coming from, and also in investing in facilities. I'm really glad to see Summer Fun coming back. I'm glad to see how vibrant the entire youth program is, and I think that's really critical. I mean, it's so much a part of what we do. I would encourage also that we not get so focused on youth that we forget about adults, and maybe more vulnerable adults, senior adults. You know, you look at the Louise Davis Center kind of lumbering along, you think, gosh, that's a senior center for all intents and purposes, and, you know, really, is that the right place to be just sort of drifting along? So I just really encourage that we don't forget our adults, more vulnerable adults, in the surge to protect and increase youth programming. Absolutely, you know, the park maintenance, making sure that we actually have safe, green, vibrant outdoor space to do all this programming in. It's the secret sauce, and I think we need to make sure that we make it, you know, loud and clear that it's, if anything, it's underinvested, and it needs, certainly doesn't need to be cut, and it probably needs to be increased and maintained, and really given the visibility and focus that the other parts of the Parks and Recreation remit have, the ones that are more obviously visible. Yeah, I like the comment that first responders are not just fire and police. First responders are park employees every single day. So.
We'll coin that one.
And I think that's really it. We don't have public comment that I'm aware of, right? So I leave that to a recommendation to council, which is handily in front of me. So the recommendation is that we approve the proposed fiscal year 23 Gulf Fund, Creeks Fund, and General Fund operating and capital budgets, including the proposed fees and charges schedule. And do we need a motion to do that? We do, don't we? Yes.
Yeah, that was me.
We'll make that a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay,
There
thank
you
you.
go.
Do we have any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And with that, in not too terrible a timeline, I think that takes us out. And so I will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting will be on May 23rd. I would say, don't pencil in that or pen in that May 9th meeting with City Council. Thank you very much.